It's election season. That's in my top 5 personal favourite seasons. Are you excited for another 6 months of the most insane, earth-shattering political events conceivable taking place approximately every 3 hours? By which I mean American life. God, me neither. And I don't even live there. I'm just sick of hearing about you freaks. In 2022, Britain had what could very reasonably be considered the most insane year politically in its entire post-war era. And somehow the US outdoes that seemingly twice a day every day during every election cycle with all the manic anxiety of one of those Mario Party minigames where you push a switch and see if you die or not. So in order to save you from the madness and myself from having to learn about it, I'm gonna step up. I want you to imagine for a moment that we live in a nicer world, a more sane world. Imagine for a moment that one of the candidates is a certified gamer. And even more so, imagine that that candidate has constructed a cabinet of the finest, most recognisable characters the virtual world has to offer in an effort to win the vote of fellow gamers. Surely the most underserved demographic in American political history. I am your host, Fudge. My degree is in writing. My place of residence is in Essex, England. Yet, in our imaginary gamer-friendly society, I am running for the office of American President because I believe I am the only man for the job to rally the gamers and the normies as a unity candidate. Unity meaning the concept of togetherness in this instance and not the game engine. We haven't forgotten that runtime fee policy, Unity, and my government will be on you like a fly on shit. So as to reach the largest swath of potential voters possible, I am fielding the candidates for my cabinet from the company that have produced the most popular, most well-liked video game characters to yet exist. I am building my cabinet out of Nintendo characters. In this video I will be filling the following roles from the Big N's prized pantheon: Vice President, Secretary of State, Secretary of the Treasury, Secretary of Defense, Attorney General, Secretary of the Interior, Secretary of Agriculture, Secretary of Commerce, Secretary of Labour, Secretary of Health and Human Services, Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Secretary of Transportation, Secretary of Energy, Secretary of Education, Secretary of Veteran Affairs, and Secretary of Homeland Security. That's 16 roles, and as fitting as it would be to appoint Cranky Kong to the Supreme Court, that's enough. We're going to go in reverse order of perceived importance, by which I mean reverse of the order the roles were listed on Wikipedia, and end the video with the reveal of my Vice President. So let's delay no further and meet my crack team of electable officials. Emphasis on the crack. This is my presidential cabinet built entirely out of Nintendo characters. So for my Secretary of Homeland Security, I had to do a bit of research on the difference between the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Defense. What I understand is that the Department of Defense is far more concerned with affairs abroad, like seizing oil, and the Department of Homeland Security is all about affairs at home, like protecting our oil. So we need someone who can quell civil unrest with a stern but compassionate hand. In a lot of the following roles, we're going to talk about the multiple candidates who were in the running before I made my final decision, but not so here. This one's easy. We're starting off with a deep cut. My Secretary of Homeland Security is Doshin the Giant, whose whole thing is helping and hindering local villagers and absorbing their love and or hate. So he's a very simple disciplinary measure. If everyone plays nice and gets along, he stays yellow and helps you out with your daily tasks. If you motherfuckers try and pull a January 6th on me, boom, now he's Jashin the Giant. Tried destabilising my democracy from inside a river of fire, boomers. Is it a little bit dystopian? Maybe, But this whole they go low, we go high bullshit from the Democrats has been eroding American democracy for the last 10 years, and I think it's time we stop fucking around and bring out the big guns. Be nice, there is a giant above you. Also, he's not a member of the Department of Defense, but I mean he might as well double up as one. Who do you think's fucking with us when they can see Doshin the Giant from Pyongyang? Keep testing your rockets, glorious leader. They might be able to take out his left nipple. This one was also very simple. I don't think there's a ton of suitable candidates from within Nintendo canon, so I went with Admiral Bobbery from Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door for my Secretary of Veteran Affairs. He is kind of a veteran himself, an old depressed sailor who's well past his prime, which I think gives him a lot of relatability. His wife is long dead, which means he's got no distractions from the job, and he has provably helped improve diplomatic relations between Mario and the Bob-ombers before. Now, my fellow Americans, I understand your concerns. Yes, he is a bomb. But really, is there anything more American than that? No. Also, he's old as balls, so I think it's unlikely he can even blow a load, let alone his own fuse. My Secretary of Education is Dr. Kawashima. I considered Dr. Mario as well, but his field of expertise is very narrow, and Dr. Kawashima can actually just do what he does too. Through his revolutionary brain training, Dr. Kawashima got a whole generation of casuals and idiot box enthusiasts interested in flexing their brain and testing their brain age. His expertise is also a little bit narrow, with not much attention paid to history and religious studies, for example, but that's what we have a whole department for. Plus, he's been around since the DS. He's ancient. He might as well be dust. I'm sure he can at least impart a few useful nuggets about history. Secretary of Energy was a tough one, but I've ultimately gone with Chibi Robo. Professor Egad was under some consideration, but I don't want too many crazy old white guys in my cabinet, even if, as I say, I will not be appointing my Supreme Court in this video. Chibi Robo is the best of both worlds in regards to both the conservation and the efficient use of energy. Given that his life is literally dependent on his battery, he has of course learned the importance of using energy wisely, but he also cleans up mess, and particularly in Chibi Robo Park Patrol, saves flowers and fights off pollution. Boston Dynamics may have conditioned you guys over in the States to the idea that robots are going to be cops hardwired to shoot you dead in the street for thought crimes, but with this cabinet appointment, I want to show that they can be kind of neat too. I mean, look at this little guy. He is 4 inches tall, which will make press conferences particularly tough. I don't know how we're going to build a podium for him, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Plus, as any keen-eyed political mind will know, memes are marketing in this day and age, and I suspect many of the internet's most doe-eyed liberals will have a field day with Chibi Robo and Doshin the Giant being in the same cabinet. Secretary of Transportation was a close call. My initial instinct was to go with Yoshi, who is in fact himself transportation. So committed to the cause of transportation is Yoshi that he has spent his entire life figuratively being a car and literally being a bike. He is also cute, which would give me huge points with the TikTok generation. What would give me even huger points with the TikTok generation, however, is tackling climate change, which is why I have instead decided to opt for Link, specifically Tears of the Kingdom Link. Yoshi is a great little ATV and all, but he can't fly me around safely without a smash ball, which only shows up once every few minutes, and I don't want to have to wait around while he slams his head into walls and throws eggs all around the Oval Office trying to break it. Link, instead, can conjure up contraptions in an instant that will dramatically reduce my carbon footprint. I no longer have need for Air Force One. I will now be making diplomatic visits abroad via the presidential whirligig. The constitutional contraption. The electoral automaton, if you will. He could also help come up with a number of ingenious solutions to traffic congestion and public transportation. I'm even willing to bet he'd be able to help the average commuter skip half their average journey entirely. Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, it's Isabel. It's obvious. I mean, come on, this is like literally her thing. I'm not even going to explain this one. I even think I need to. I don't. So I kind of disregarded Dr. Mario for Education Secretary earlier, but I kind of think he might be the only pick for Secretary of Health and Human Services. Having 2 doctors in my cabinet may seem a little redundant, but we're working with a limited field here, and it's better than having 2 war criminals as a totally random example. When fielding opinions on cabinet appointments, I had a few people bring up Nurse Joy from Pokemon, but she's really an anime exclusive character who's never appeared in any main series Pokemon games as far as I can tell, being spiritually replaced by the Pokemon Center ladies, who we never see do anything outside of use machinery that basically does their job for them, so I'm not convinced of their efficiency in a crisis. Dr. Mario at least gets in there, gets down and dirty with the viruses. I'm just a little concerned at how many jobs Mario holds down at a time. Can he really be an effective medical expert when he's like 8 other things all at the same time? You're not going to be allowed to have any of those crazy parties when you're on the job, Mario. COVID too could happen at any time. Get off that jet ski! And if you even so much as think about going and shooting some hoops on a spaceship whilst the next viral outbreak occurs, you will be held responsible for the many deaths that follow. As you can probably tell, I'm not exactly thrilled about this appointment. If Smash is any indication, Dr. Mario can barely fight off the bottom 5 characters in the game, much less the spreading of Ebola, but he's the best we've got. Godspeed, Dr. Mario. My Secretary of Labour was almost always going to come from Animal Crossing, one of the few Nintendo series in which you actually see people working jobs. I needed someone who understands not only what it is to work the hard graft, but also who understands the common man. And given that his brother is about the most stereotypical rage-filled blue-collar worker imaginable, I've gone with Don Rossetti. Appointing someone who is clearly the much calmer, more reasonable brother of an aggressive maniac is good optics for us, and I have the utmost faith in him to talk to the unions and settle worker disputes in a rational manner. It is also not lost on me that as an Englishman, I may be somewhat hard to stomach as President of the United States for many of my American citizens. So appointing someone from a family so quintessentially American-Italian should hopefully go a long way in making me more palatable to the American electorate. In this sense, yes, Don Rossetti is a DEI hire. But in this instance, I believe DEI can stand for Don's Excellence Indisputable. Or perhaps it could stand for Damn Excellent Incentives, because have you seen the Palette Swap Patreon? There is, if I may say so myself, some sick stuff on here. We're talking early access to videos, names in video credits, voting on the monthly greatest hits section of our website, access to our Patreon exclusive Discord, and more. It is currently entirely how we fund our operation, and thanks to our supporters, we have at long last finally been able to begin paying the people who work on our site, but we can still do more, lots more, if perhaps you would be so generous as to take a trip on over to patreon.com/paletteswapmag and take a look at what we have on offer. Thank you, gamers, and thank you, America. Much like I did earlier with the Departments of Homeland Security and Defense, I had a little trouble figuring out the difference between the Department of Commerce and the United States Treasury, but I'm under the impression that the Treasury is more about managing our own finances and economy and printing money, whereas the Department of Commerce is all about brokering trade deals and managing trade laws both domestically and internationally. Basically, the equivalent of the Trade Secretary we have over here in the UK. Therefore, my choice is easy. In Snowpoint City in Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, there is a little girl called Mindy who offers to trade you a Haunter for a Medicham. Seasoned Pokemon veterans will of course know that this is an amazing deal, as Haunter evolves into the supremely powerful Gengar upon being traded. Yet, when you receive the Haunter, nothing happens. And this is because the little girl has attached to the Haunter an Everstone, an item that stops Pokemon from evolving so long as they are holding it. Mindy will be my trade secretary. I understand that she is a child, but I do not care. We need someone who can make the big plays like this, who can secure me incredible deals. There was no written contract, there was nothing in any kind of agreement suggesting that the Haunter was going to evolve. It's on you to read the fine print. Mindy, I say good for you. What a shrewd business move. welcome aboard. The Secretary of Agriculture needs to help us make the most out of plant life in the natural world, and Captain Olimar took a single vegetable sprout and turned it into an army. I am not saying I am necessarily interested in mobilising wheat, but this is exactly the kind of guy we need at the fore. He clearly has a very special relationship with vegetables. No bog standard farmer like any of the protagonists from Harvest Moon could even stand a chance of pulling the kinds of miracles he does. He even was a plant for a brief period. Kind of. Yes, admittedly, there is a slight cause for concern in that he doesn't know what fruit is. Upon encountering them, he refers to them as things like face wrinkler or citrus lump, but he immediately recognises their core characteristics, which, when considered alongside the rest of his resume, is more than enough. We'll work on those fruit names. Secretary of the Interior was a weird one, and it took quite a lot of digging to figure out what this really entails. I even watched like an official video from the US government about it, and I mean, it's kind of an environmental department. It's like a combination of the jobs I have Chibi Robo and Olimar doing, but I also need to appoint a separate person for this to maintain our parks and forests and all that jazz. I really struggled with this, considering that I feel like I've already appointed two pretty similar roles, so I ultimately wound up going with a pretty boring but sensible choice in Leaf from Animal Crossing. I mean, his whole thing is that he loves flowers. Diplomacy with the Native Americans is something he's just going to have to learn to pick up. Really, as long as he's working far away from me and I don't have to look at his face, I'm happy. I was not thrilled about appointing a third rep from Animal Crossing because they feel a little easy for a video like this, a bit like cheating, so I will be refraining from including any more Animal Crossing characters in my cabinet. Diversity is one of America's greatest virtues. Attorney General was tough. If this was Capcom, it'd be easy. But alas, this is not Capcom, and Nintendo don't really have any dedicated lawyer-type characters in their backlog. I've gone with Peppy Hare. He's been around a long time, he's seen some shit. Legal counsel may not be his profession, but I think he's experienced enough to have good instincts in such matters, especially seeing as he was betrayed by a criminal and spent much of his young life fighting against scoundrels and evil scientists. This relatively recent render of him just gives me real attorney vibes. Look at the single pointed finger. Dude is absolutely about to say, "Objection, Your Honor," and then lay down some crazy legal spiel. Bro is about to filibuster someone into the 2030s. Plus, I mean, he's not really doing much lately. Hey, I'm sorry, he's not. Don't blame me, blame the Wii U gamepad. There were a lot of good candidates for Secretary of Defense. I almost doubled up on Star Fox characters and just went with Fox himself. I mean, offense is defense, particularly when the matter at hand is oil and colonization, and it always is. His style of combat is very American, and yet high-tech starships and precision-fire laser guns are as nothing compared to Seth from Fire Emblem: The Sacred Stones. A rank in 2 weapon types, the 4th highest growth rates in the game, 8 movement per turn. If you don't know what a Jagan is, it's the name given to an archetype of unit that pops up early on in most Fire Emblem games, often of the Paladin class, who are intentionally designed to be extraordinarily busted at the start of the game and only fall off somewhat towards the end. Kind of a guardian angel for the player if they're just starting out with the series, and often an actual guardian angel in the narrative to the main character. Even among this incredibly powerful archetype, Seth is surely one of the absolute strongest. You can beat the entire game with just Seth and rarely, if ever, be in any serious danger. I am making it one of my electoral pledges. If I can have Seth Fire Emblem Sacred Stones as my Secretary of Defense, I will denuclearize. Hell, I'll lay off the entire military and use their salary to buy all of the American population an air fryer. We don't need any of that stuff anymore. I'm gonna give Seth a silver lance and let him handle all the rest. If China invades Taiwan, maybe I'll send, like, Amelia with him as a contractor. Sleep well, America. You are safe. The obvious choice for Secretary of the Treasury if I were running as a Republican would be Wario. However, since I'm running as a Democrat and am therefore intent on being evil in ways slightly more palatable to a general audience, I need to look elsewhere. And this was also kinda tough. There's a lot of affluent characters in Nintendo's vault, sure, but 14 of my most formative years under a conservative government over here in the UK has taught me that having a lot of money doesn't actually make you good at managing it. Mostly, it just makes you a cunt. So I've landed on Alakazam. That's right, Alakazam, an actual Pokemon. I said that diversity was one of our greatest virtues. Yeah, sure, why not? I mean, its dex entries state that it has an IQ of 5,000 and that its brain can outperform a supercomputer. I don't need economic advice. I know that I'm going to tax the rich and fund universal healthcare. I just need something that will crunch the numbers. Technically, Mega Alakazam would be smarter, but look at that beard. I did say no more old white guys. I understand some may worry that the hyper-intelligent Alakazam could grow tired of its masters and turn on them, seizing the White House for itself, to which I would point out its pitiful base 45 physical defense stat. One tackle from the biggest guy in the Secret Service and his little coup is done for. Back to balance in the books, buddy. Secretary of State is one of the highest ranking, most front-facing positions in the cabinet, and for this role I am making a potentially controversial appointment. Secretary of State is all about foreign affairs and diplomatic relationships abroad, and to this end, my choice is King K. Rool. Think about it for a moment. King K. Rool is a Japanese video game character created in England, serving in America, where he's huge, and he's surely got some Australian heritage going on too. Very few other picks would appeal to such a wide swath of international partners, and being a king grants him this kind of exotic authority that I think would make him hard to turn down, as would a bite force of approximately 3,700 psi. I understand there would be some reservations about his supposed evil nature, but I'm not so convinced that he's entirely evil so much as he's simply motivated by bananas, which he and his entire army of Kremlings, who would surely be folded into the Department of Homeland Security, can have no end of in the White House mess. And as a fellow Brit, I believe we would have a certain kinship, an understanding that would surely prevent him from giving in to his more base impulses. No pick can relate to so many countries, endear themselves to so many cultures. Criticise him all you want, you won't be hating when he gets Turkey to start playing nice with NATO again. And now it's time to talk about our final and most crucial appointment. Or, well, I'd say most crucial, but really it's a known fact that the Vice President is kinda just a figurehead. A prospective US presidential candidate themselves even said as much recently. They don't really do anything. What's most important for a Vice President is pretty much to be liked, stay popular and say the right things, even if the right thing is as simple as... Ask yourself this, viewer. Could you really vote against Kirby? Would you? Do you care what his policies are? No. Because for all the inflation he may bring with him, I'll be the one handling policy and keeping it down. Kirby as my Vice President is a veritable political Swiss Army knife. There is nothing he cannot do. As an unstoppable force of cosmic power who also happens to be adorable and beloved by the general populace, I believe he can assist the Department of Homeland Security in all military matters, re-stabilise democracies by swallowing would-be dictators. Should our scientific exploits bring us into contact with murderous aliens, he could almost certainly handle the entire matter by himself, and perhaps most importantly, I believe he can unite all American people, from Democrat to Republican, gamers to normies. I struggle to imagine anyone who would not feel the moral fibre of this country greatly strengthened by the presence of our greatest modern politician, Vice President Kirby. And with him at the head of this stacked cabinet of professionals and puffballs alike, I believe we could make the United States a nicer place. A better place for all, but mostly for gamers. Wouldn't that be nice? Well, video's over, back to reality. But not before I say a huge thank you to Palette Swap's legendary tier patrons. Serial Law Obeyer, Kinslow TN, Bijan Imadi, Bad Speller, Strawberry, Yo Adrian, and War Crimes Uwu. As we said earlier, Palette Swap has finally been able to start paying our staff and freelancers because of your continued support, so we can't thank you enough and tell you how much we appreciate it. It's only onwards and upwards for us from here, and we'll see you again very soon.